Shabbat Shalom. I want to spend a few moments with you speaking about women. There's almost never any good that comes out of it for me or for any man. Men always get in trouble when they speak about women. I learned this principle already in rabbinical school, where my female colleagues warned me, don't even try it. But still, I speak with you almost every week. From time to time, it's okay to live a little dangerously, even for rabbis. I hope. I'm sure I'll get emails about this. I actually tell younger colleagues that every now and again, it's okay to speak about something so unexpected, so baffling, so off-kilter as to reestablish our reputations as sophisticated scholars and intellectual trendsetters, the Andy Warhols of the Bema. Anyway, what caught my attention was the swearing in of 20 female senators yesterday. They still represent only 1 in 5 votes, where women constitute over 50% of American voters. Nonetheless, the Senate has more women representatives than ever. And that's surely a good thing, no? The female senators themselves think so. They think that their expanded presence in Washington will bring much needed healing to the political process. The female senators suspect that part of the problem in Washington is the overrepresentation of men. Pure and simple, too many men here. When we look at the political dysfunction in the Capitol, filled with such manly pursuits as jumping off cliffs and banging into ceilings and staring each other down until the last man blinks and we see the whites of their eyes, when we observe what are considered to be effective negotiating tactics filled with fake and real obscenity-laced temper tantrums and other such fine manly virtues, as the Speaker of the House suggesting to the majority leader of the Senate to do something to himself that is anatomically impossible. Well, maybe these women have a point. They certainly think so. In a recent interview, they all agreed that more women in the room would help to bring compromise, a trait which they say does not come naturally to men. And they are bipartisan in their convictions. Both Democrat and Republican female senators agree that women tend to be more collaborative and less confrontational. Women have a camaraderie that helps relationships that comes more naturally to them than to men. I'm emphasizing here that it is not me talking. Don't send me emails. It's the women senators themselves who are saying this, and I'm only quoting what they themselves say. Here is Senator Feinstein. We're less on testosterone. We don't have that need always to be confrontational. We leave our ego at the door and we are more natural consensus builders, said Senator Cantwell of Washington. If the major issue of our era is the stalemate of Congress, she emphasized, then the message to the American people should be to elect more consensus builders to get the job done. Every man wakes up in the morning and looks in the mirror and says, I could be president, said Senator Murray. Every woman looks in the mirror and says, what can I get done for my country today? Well, I'm not so sure about that. I have heard of and can imagine some women who look in the mirror and say to themselves, I could be president. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But to quote Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that, because I'm already on dangerous territory. But still, you can't help but hope, as our Senator Kirsten Gillibrand said, it's women who are going to lead the way. After all, it happened before. Women led the way in the Torah portion of the week. Shmot, the beginning passages in the book of Exodus. The Bible emphasizes the female heroines without which there would have been no Exodus. There were the midwives, Shifra and Puah, who defied Pharaoh's decree to kill all the boys they deliver. Had it not been for them, there would have been no Jewish people and no Exodus. There was Moses' mother, Yocheved, who defied Pharaoh's decree to throw the firstborn into the Nile, hiding her son for months before placing him in a basket and casting him on the river, hoping that someone would find and save him. There was Pharaoh's daughter, who defied her father's decree. When she finds the boy, she immediately knows who he is. This must be a Hebrew boy, she exclaims. And nonetheless, she had compassion upon him and raised him like her own. And there was Miriam, Moses' sister, who watched over the basket as it floated down the Nile and approached Pharaoh's daughter after she found the boy and arranged that Yocheved nurse him. The Bible is telling us that these women had certain virtues that saved the world. First, they had courage. All of them had courage. They all defied Pharaoh. They defied Pharaoh at great risk. One cannot overestimate the fear, the threat of retaliation, the punishment, the sword of death hanging over anyone who defied the king. We see examples of this type of courage every day, even in our own times, in Syria, in Egypt, in many places where oppressors oppress. Even Pharaoh's daughter demonstrated extraordinary courage. Presumably, her father might have been merciful on her had he found out what she did, but she demonstrated a more subtle form of courage. She went against her own tribe, her own family, her own people's laws and customs. And that's very hard. It involves breaking ranks and risking scorn. We see examples of this more subtle form of courage every day, even in our day. In people criticizing national policies, going against their parties, their camps, their peers, their colleagues, their fixed ideologies. Most people do not have this kind of courage in them. And in truth, we never know who will, when it really counts, get up and fight. Real courage is an amazing attribute, precisely because it's so rare. Susan Sontag wrote, "Courage inspires communities, for courage is as contagious as fear." But in the end, courage is morally neutral. You can be courageous for the wrong things. There are murderers and terrorists who are courageous for all that is vile. And therefore, the Bible emphasizes a second attribute that must accompany courage: principle. The Torah says this about the midwives. The midwives feared God and hence did not do as the king of Egypt decreed. It was this attribute, fear of God, that prompted the midwives to do not only the courageous thing, but the principled thing. Fear of God overcame fear of Pharaoh. Today, in our less religious culture, we might describe the fear of God in more secular terms. That is principle, doing right, courage not only for its own sake, but for the sake of a higher cause, justice and righteousness. Courage is only admirable if it is employed in the service of high principle. The Bible tells us that Pharaoh did not know God. It is the Torah's way of contrasting Pharaoh's power based on fear with the power of the midwives based on morals. But even the fear of God is not enough. We have many examples throughout history, including in our very day, of people who sincerely fear God. But this fear of God renders them frightful. People who believe with every fiber of their being that doing the wrong thing is the right thing. That the wrong principle is the right principle. And therefore the Bible emphasizes a third attribute of the female heroines of the Exodus. The Torah says this about Pharaoh's daughter when she finds Moses in the Nile. Vatiftach, ותראהו הילד את הילד והנה הנער בוכה ותחמול עליו. And Pharaoh's daughter opened the basket and saw the infant crying, and she took pity on him. This is such a great verse. The commentators point out that when Pharaoh's daughter opened the basket, she saw the crying. Most people only hear the crying. But Pharaoh's daughter also saw the crying, and it was this that caused her to have compassion on the baby. Compassion, pity, and mercy, the capacity to peer deeply into a person's soul, to not only hear their cries, but to see their cries. This is what gives courage and converts courage and principle into high moral worth. It's what the women in the Exodus story had that is distinctly missing from the descriptions about the men. In the end, high principle is about people. It's not only about political theories. This is what is so often missing in our dysfunctional political environment. Now, I don't know if, and I will not venture to suggest whether women have superior capacities of compassion, pity, mercy, healing, and seeing the cries and the pains of others. Some women, including newly elected senators, think that as a group, they do have these capacities more than men. If so, yes, please. Bring it on. That's what we need. We also need men. And what literature tells us are manly virtues. And what experts tell us are the physiological and sociological benefits of the testosterone that Senator Feinstein pointed out. But this talk is about women. And perhaps nowadays, in our society, there is an imbalance. Let's get a little less of crashing into ceilings and jumping off cliffs from politicians and leaders, and a little more of hearing and seeing a baby's cries. This will be good for the country. Amen.